Hey everyone, welcome to Python4Lib, where we kind of talk tips, tricks, and learning strategies for using Python within libraries. We're generally focused on tech services stuff, but we cover it all when it comes to libraries, digital repositories, GLAM things, etc. So, really excited today. So we've got Andromeda Yelton, who is a lead software engineer at JSTOR Labs, wanting to discuss UV with us. UV is one of those modules that we've talked about here and there, particularly around versioning and packaging. And so to have someone kind of very familiar with it, give a demo and talk through it is really exciting. So beyond that, I'll hand it over to Andromeda. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is just like a zero prep me ranting about UV kind of talk, but I love it, so I hope you will like it too. Anyway, we've probably all seen the XKCD on installing Python and managing your Python environments and what a pain it is. I actually at one point screwed up a Python installation so comprehensively, I just bought a new computer. So, yeah. Um, So once upon a time in the bad old days, we used Venv to manage all of our Python dependencies if we wanted to make sure that each project could have its own dependencies with its own pinned versions that were isolated from whatever other projects we were using in our systems. And we wanted to make sure we could share those versions with fellow developers of our projects who were all looking at the same thing. That was better than nothing, but I don't know about you. I was never able to remember the commands to work with Venv. I had to Google them every time. Um, and of course, Venv only manages like dependencies. It doesn't also manage Python versions, which are still a pain to install. And then at one point, a colleague of mine did a presentation on pipenv, which is a better tool for managing Python environments and pinning dependencies and stuff. And I've never switched to a tool so fast as I switched to pipenv, and that was nice. And it handles version dependency versioning and having a version dependency file and a lock file and stuff, and that was nice. But I still didn't manage Python versions. Um, and then UV happened, and UV manages dependency versioning and Python versioning. And it's written in Rust, so it's like crazy fast. So I'm just gonna do some stuff. I'm gonna make a UV sample project. Now I wanna actually make it and then CD to it. I wanna spell it right. All right, UV init, start a new project. Cool. It has a main.py, which doesn't really do anything. It's like a hello world. It has a Python, it has a README, and it has a pyproject.toml, which is where you can keep like project metadata. If you haven't used pyproject.toml before, it includes the stuff you would see in like a requirements file. So it includes your dependencies, but it also has some metadata about your project. You know, you can add a description, you can add authors, whatever, whatever. Um, Another thing that you can have in a UV project is you can have a .python version file where you keep track of the Python version. And I guess it automatically initialized that to 3.12, but you know what? We're going to try specifying 3.14 for this project because I am pretty sure I don't have Python 3.14 installed on my system right now. Um, And then we're going to decide we would like to have some kind of dependency. Does anyone have a favorite Python package?
There's pandas, there's requests that we often use for examples here, or
Requests. All
or
right.
pi or PyMark is another one we use.
I'm going to add requests. Nice package. Um, and remember at this point, I have a Python version file specifying a version of Python that I don't think I have. And I want to add requests um, to my pyproject.toml file. So I'm going to hit enter. And it notices, oh, you don't have 314. It is done. it just installed CPython 3.14. It created a virtual environment. It did the package dependency resolution. It installed all the packages. The installation part took 7 milliseconds. Like this entire process took less than a second. Installing freaking Python. And if I wanted a different version of Python, I could just change it. I could have also passed in a command line flag to UV, but like then I'd have to memorize a command line flag, and I could just not do that. Um, if I had in fact skipped the UV add part, if I'd put requests in my pyproject.toml and then tried to run that main.py file, um, which just prints out like a hello world thing, if I'd done UV init, I guess, but skipped the UV add and just gone straight to UV run python main.py, it would have noticed it didn't have the dependencies and gone out and gotten them for me and then run it. It's like crazy useful. Um, you can also remove things. You can add things with specific versions from the command line, although I don't remember um offhand the syntax. It's probably the same syntax you use everything else, everywhere else. Yeah. Um, yeah. Question.
I just wanted to prompt you to tell people how powerful remove is compared to pip uninstall. That it
I
actually,
haven't used naked pip in so long, but note that it did remove everything that depended on it as well as requests. It updated the lock file, which has like SHAs, so you can check some against the things you've actually installed. So you've got some low key like supply chain protection there. Um, like you notice now there's also a uv.lock file, and that is storing like all of the version metadata, like specific versions. It's got the whole dependency tree, dependency graph of all of the subdependencies and stuff. It's got your checksums and everything. So you know you're downloading the same version as what you got. And yeah, this file got automatically updated when I add and remove requests with whatever like dependencies I happen to need. Um, Honestly, there's not a lot to say about UV. That's really what it is. There's more command line flags that you can do, but I don't care, in part because I don't like memorizing command line flags, and in part because it takes care of so much of the stuff so transparently. Like literally, if I only knew UV run and everything else I'd done was like editing the pyproject.toml file or editing the Python version file, and all I did was UV run, it would figure out the rest of it for me and it would do it ludicrously fast. Um, so that's kind of great. And all I use now is UV. Like I have migrated, we had poetry instead of pipenv at JSTOR Labs. Those are kind of equivalent as far as I'm concerned, but like we're migrating our poetry projects to UV. When I'm starting a new Python project, I use UV. Um, it's so fast. I don't know. Any other UV questions?
Yeah, I did have one question, or actually kind of a two-parter. How, like I see your demo environment is Linux. If we, in some cases, need to do Python on Windows, is it compatible, or is there a compatible version of UV on Windows? And second part, too, in the Anaconda environment, I know it can have its own kind of hiccups compared to a standard Python environment. You know if it plays well with Conda and stuff, or is it pip only, or
Yeah, so I'm on a Mac, so it's Unix-like, but it's not actually a Linux machine. I don't do any coding on Windows, so I don't know the state of UV for Windows. I don't think I have any dev colleagues using Windows here. In terms of Conda, I can get a good answer to that for you because I know my husband works in an organization where both UV and Conda are in play, and like he is currently on the pointy end of trying to get them to play nice with each other. So I will know how to do that soon because he will know how to do that soon. Um, It's not really what it's made for. Like UV really wants to do all your dependency management. And if you have two different dependency management tools in the same stack, they are going to be kind of fighting with each other as to like
Right.
who's running what. Like Conda isn't going to manage your UV lock file. So if you're adding dependencies with Conda and then you're using UV, it's going to be like, I don't know. I feel like the lock file is out of sync with the world. And they're probably going to thrash. And I would avoid that if possible. I understand that there are people who are very like conda oriented, especially certain like researchers and machine learning people, but
Yeah, we're expanding very heavily into digital humanities lately.
yeah.
So, and that whole new group of programmers, they're very much into Anaconda and
Yeah, and I think yeah, if you have users who are like very deeply embedded in the Conda universe and maybe like using Jupyter notebooks that have Conda integration going on, I would meet them where they're at. Um, I'm not a Conda person. Um, but I will ask him to give me the TLDR on that so I can copy it into the channel. I'll do that right now before I forget.
another kind of related would be then too, if UV itself doesn't interact with Conda, if there's something that does some of the uh handy dandy type stuff that UV does that's designed for Conda instead of like coming from a pip type environment, that'll be handy to know too.
Yeah, I will get you more information on that.
Just keeping up on some comments in the chat as well. It looks like a couple people looked up, and Windows does seem to have pretty good support, or UV does seem to work really well on Windows as well.
Okay, cool.
I think
Oh, and I guess another thing, as long as we're talking about integrations, that is worth keeping in mind is the people who do UV are also running and developing like a whole universe of Python dev tools, like Rust-based, ludicrously fast Python development tools. So they have like a type checker. And all of these tools work really well together. So in particular, you I don't think they run the rough linter. I think that's somebody else,
No,
but
it's them.
it's them. Okay.
Okay.
But UV and rough, the linter, play together like ludicrously well. So you can configure your linter through the PyProject file, and you can integrate like UV and rough and Git and just be like, oh yeah, everything just lints itself and it's great. So yeah, if you like things like linting and type checking as well as dependency management, this sort of there's a whole like dev tool chain stuff that's emerging that plays nice together. Yeah, other question.
I made some slides with some generic use cases of using UV,
Sweet.
and I could share them, but then if you can look at
Go
them
for it.
Gemini and tell me, oh, you got that wrong, or like, okay, I do it a little bit different, because I've done this academic research, you could say, but I've not used it as much.
Go for it.
But one thing that has helped me understand it better is that for my job, we use Drupal, which is PHP based, and we use a tool called PHP Composer. And I kind of wish there was that functionality from PHP Composer's product in the Python world. So I'm seeing that, oh, because I could kind of see it in poetry, and now I'm seeing in UV, like using what's called a log file. So let me put a link to my slides.
I like the,
Yeah,
the
I've
live
given
checking.
I've stopped sharing, so you should be able to share if you want.
Well, the ironic thing is the person actually knows how to use the tool really well. Is Andromeda. I just did the academic research, so she's gonna correct. I just take it. I have two monitors. It takes me a few seconds to get to be able to share.
I like this as a presentation concept too, where it's like, oh yeah, let's do some live checking.
I'm
So,
like the intern.
I really like this slide with the Venn diagram situation, though. It's a very gratifying color scheme, and
Can't find.
while we're setting up Andromeda, can I ask, it sounded like you had mentioned you were using poetry mostly. Was there a compelling reason to switch over to UV? Just kind of a compare and contrast, or like what
So
ultimately?
fast.
Yeah, just the
And
speed.
it handles your Python version management as well. And I think
Okay.
with poetry, like you still have to have PyEnv in your life
Mhm.
for installing and managing Python versions. And with UV, you don't. Um, and even installing the Python versions, like I cannot believe how fast UV installs Python versions. Because I
Mhm.
expect adding a new Python version to be like, okay, now I wait several minutes, maybe I make some coffee, whatever. And you saw, I was like, I would like 314, please. And it was like, okay, half a second elapsed. Now you have 314. I'm like, how is this possible?
Nice.
Just like insane how fast it is. Yeah.
Cool.
So like 2 years ago, I saw this, I believe a German woman, I could be wrong, her first name is Anna, give a presentation, I think Python Europe, that had this Venn diagram, but UV did not exist back then.
Right. Because it's pretty new.
And then she updated and added UV, but but this is already like a year old, at least 8 months old. You could argue UV could be placed in the middle of the Venn diagram, right where Rye and PDM and PyFlow is. And I believe Rye is a product that some of the founders of Astro first created, and they felt they reached a dead end, so they restart from scratch and create UV. So it makes sense that Rye origin was in the middle, and UV by now could go in the middle of all this various functionality. And some people do have a concern that maybe it tries to do too much, but it's delivering. So from a realpython.com article, here's a quick list of all the things that it can do. We can revisit this later, but just quickly, the ways to install, you can use curl on Linux and macOS or even wget to just do this bash script, or you can use something like homebrew, and that's the command for Windows. Now, here are some curated facts. I said, right now, UV is a free and open source product. But the company, and they hinted for a while, they're a for-profit company, they're just going to be rolling out a paid cloud-related service platform in the future. It's almost like creating your own private PyPI where you can install like pandas from their platform for a cost, because they'll do like virus checking and malware checking. So they're doing like a beta right now. I think it's called PyX. And that's a link to their blog post where I talk about it. But right now it's free, but they said that they're going to keep tools like Rough and UV free and open source with a permissive license, that they plan to make their money with this online platforms, and you're not required to use their paid platform when you use their tools. So there was a blog post, I forget how recent it was, but it was reassuring, because a lot of the Python community folks were waiting to see how they're going to try and make their money. So they're going to have the subscription base. So like I said earlier, they make the Rough tool, and we'll see mentions of Rough later in some of the features that UV provides. And one of the things that can blow your mind that Jeremy mentioned, you don't need to have Python already installed to get started with UV. And UV can actually go ahead and automatically behind the scenes download a version of Python for you, and will manage multiple versions for you. Now, what makes some people worried is these are Python binaries created by Astro. They work for multiple OSs, but sometimes some people are very concerned about security, that you're getting this from a private company. I think it is fine, but it's a change from the Python binaries you get from python.org. And next topic, Andromeda mentioned that UV relies on this more modern way to manage project dependencies and other information, which is called the PyProject.toml file, and it automatically updates it for you. There's some things you can go in to update, like the name of your brand new project and the copyright, but a lot of things PyProject would update for you, so you don't have to learn that syntax. UV can still read the older, requirements that TXT files, and I'll show a workflow for that a little bit later. And just like Jeremiah mentioned, behind the scenes, UV will handle the virtual environments, creating them and activating them, so there's less syntax for you to learn. So it is very surprising and it's almost addicting. Like once you start with UV, you may not want to turn back. And Andromeda, of course, already mentioned that there's this use of a log file that I was familiar with them, for example, from the PHP world. And they're very key for reproducibility. Because sometimes when you say, for my product, you need pandas and you need requests. Well, when you have a log file, you can say, it worked on my machine because the log file says, I had this particular versions for Mac of pandas, and it worked for me. David, what are you running? So if you can get to compare log files, you can see if you're actually running the same things and try to track down what went wrong, let's say on your local server versus yourself or a colleague. So here's some cheesy use cases, and Andromeda may correct me. And this one that I put number 1 because this is what Andromeda was hinting at, it'd be great. If you want to use somebody else's code and just hit the ground running, so git clone someone's example, the manual says you use UV sync, which will read the PyPy.toml, and you do UV run, and maybe it'll grab a Python file from behind the scenes, I mean, a Python version without you even knowing it, and boom, you're off to the races. And maybe whatever part you download, it doesn't use the file main.py, it could be something else, that's why I made it italic. But it can be that simple to just get someone running. Now, if the GitHub repository had requirements.txt, which is an older standard, then you have to add one more step. And you will write uv add -r requirements.txt. And then behind the scenes, it will create an on-the-fly PyProject.toml file. And then the other 2 steps are what we saw earlier, UV sync and UV run, whatever the main Py file is for that particular application. Now, here's a workflow that Andromeda was addressing is, if you want to start from scratch, you type in UV init and whatever your app name is going to be, and then you do UV add, and let's say add request. And you can keep adding, and maybe you added something and then you want to remove it. What I really like about UV remove, it will really remove whatever package 2 was and everything it depended on, which pip does not do. When you do pip uninstall, let's say on a virtual environment, it won't remove the children requirements. And then you write your code, and then you run AV run and whatever your main Python file is. Now, Andromeda already mentioned that this is like a breakdown of what files get created for certain commands. So when you do UV init, it makes a Git repository that's empty that you can ignore. I git ignore file if the .python version where we spoke about, and I learned a new trick from Andromeda that just tweak that by hand to give it a different Python version you have, and UV will get it for you. There's a README that's blank, and then the main PI, which you could rename if you wanted, and the PyProject.toml. But if you run other commands like UV add, UV sync, or UV run, behind the scenes, it will create and temporarily activate a .ven file just for you, and that UV log file that tracks down exactly which versions were installed locally. Now, if you do want to share what you just created locally, you will start with what I call the step 2 or the use case 2, which is start from scratch, which is UV init. Oh, I forgot to add the app name there. So that's a mistake on my part, add package remove. But then when you want to share with GitHub or GitLab, you have to add to your source control the PyProject.toml, that's very important, and the UV log. And you commit and you push, and you should be all set. But a general reminder, you should not be committing your .vmv file ever, even if you're not using UV. Luckily, because UV init creates a .gitignore file, that gitignore file says to don't commit a VMV to help protect you. Now, another common use case for UV is to replace an older tool called pipx, which is to install a command line tool based in Python. So it just runs right from the command line. So the 2 ways you can do this in pipx is to do it temporarily or to do it permanently. So the temporary way to do this is to type in UV tool run and the name of the command, which happens to be called rough, and then check in this case the parameter you're passing to rough. And an even shorter syntax to do it temporarily, you do UVX rough and then whatever parameter. And Andromeda and I know someone that maintains a project called coverage.py. And if you wanted to run that, you would run UVX coverage, and you can actually run it just like that. And behind the scenes, we'll quickly download it, and you can run it without any extra effort. So this is a temporary way to install a tool like kind of like pipex. But here's a more permanent way to install one of those Python CLI tools, which is you type in uv2 install whatever the command is. And then once it's fully installed, then you can just run rough and a parameter, or do coverage and whatever the parameter is, or for example, PyTest. And here, use case 5, I just kind of overview how do you go about explicitly installing a version of Python. You can say UV Python install 3.12. Oh, I also want 3.10. And this is a syntax that Andromeda gave us a good reason. I don't want to memorize this. I'm going to just change the python.version file to do this. But if you don't want to do that trick, you have to do uv run --python, which version, and then it'll run your whatever application is by that particular version you wanted. And related commands with managing multiple Python binaries is you can use Python list, and it'll tell you which ones are available to download from Astral, which ones you have already available locally. And if you specifically want to upgrade Python 3.12.1 to something newer, then you type UV Python upgrade and that particular version to get make it go up a little bit higher. And this is really advanced. We've never really spoken about this, but the new thing that UV can support is how to share code as a distribution in PyPI. And again, you start with the same process of start from scratch. You do init, you add your package name, maybe you remove, you write your code, you run. Once it's running, now it gets a bit more complicated, but just to make you aware, if you have to make some changes in PyProject.toml for setting up what's called the build backend, and that should be a whole presentation of what that means. And then you can do UV build. And then you have to go back to PyProject.toml and set up the publishing side of it. And here's the syntax for publishing to what's called test PyPI, which is what they always recommend you do. If you're gonna share something with the world, first do it in test PyPI, set up your token on your account, because it's just for testing purposes. Don't pollute stuff with something that's half built. And I added 2 commands that I was, wow, this is really cool. And one of them is a UV tree that shows you, oh, if you install Flask, here's all the sub modules that Flask adds to your machine that you didn't realize. And related to that, if I do UV remove Flask, it will remove everything that is under Flask, which pip does not do. If I remove Flask, it may not remove Click or Jinja. So there's 2 features like, oh, I really like from UV among many, which is UV tree and UV remove package. So my presentation has some generic 2 links and 1 video of a well-known Python YouTuber giving a quick run through of what UV does. Andromeda, feedback. What did I get right or wrong?
I mean, I learned about build and publish from this, which is amazing because as someone who has put packages on PyPy before, like that was kind of irritating. And this is so simple. Glorious. Yeah.
Very cool. I was going to say there was some good chat going on as well in terms of virtual environments and how those start up when you're running UV. So just kind of a good idea to look over that if you get a chance.
Yeah, I mean, really my takeaway with UV is it does so much and it does it so simply and so fast that I would not use anything else for new Python projects today, unless there was a super compelling reason, like all my users use Conda. Then I would get new users. I don't know. And yeah, I think the point about, Astral's business model being somewhat unsure is my other concern about it, but it's so good I've decided to stick my head in the sand and not care for now.
Did have one other question. Do you know of any good or bad interactions with PyInstaller and UV? which is for, especially on Windows boxes, you can turn an existing Python project with all of its requirements and stuff and bundle it into an executing exe file that you can distribute to users.
That's cool. I don't know anything about Windows tool chains, so
Okay.
I don't know. Try it and report back.
But my guess, it shouldn't care because everything gets put in a venv, and PineStar should be able to see that and grab everything from the venv and put it in. One nice thing that Astro is doing is when it can, it tries to follow Python PEPs. I forget what PEPs stands for, but it's a standard proposal or a new standard for the Python community. At times, Astro seems to submit or propose a way to implement a draft PEP that hasn't been finalized. And when it gets finalized, they adjust to it. But they made it clear they didn't want to reinvent venvs. And I've used PyInstaller and I use a venv, so it should be just blindly look in the venv. And it should, I think by now, PyInstaller, unless you're running a really old one, should be able to read the PyProject if it needs it. But we need to test it because it may fail horribly.
Yeah, just remember, especially early days of PyInstaller, it had odd behavior on seemingly random things. And I know it's much better than it used to be these days. But yeah, that's why I was just wondering if it's something that had been tested yet or not. But yeah, it might be something that if I switch over to UV, then I might start testing.
But I would make, I have a controversial idea that I want to get Andromeda's take. Because we speak so much about PyInstaller here or in the thread, because we write some cute little script or longer script that some colleague says, oh, I want to run that. Well, let me teach you content, let me set up the path, and then like, wait a minute, maybe we don't have to deal with PyInstaller as much and just have people run UV. We show them one or two commands, and Astro takes care of it all.
The
That is
problem
what's
is
mind-blowing. Go ahead.
problem is the user base. I'm developing most of these tools too. They are GUI only type people. So yeah, just seeing a command line, they start to freak out.
Excellent feedback. I'm gonna write that down. My response to that is like, we just make a bash script that they double click that runs what I show, which is git clone, UV sync, UV run, and you're welcome. But I'm not saying it's perfect, but I'm just trying to
Right.
push the YAML just a little bit.
Yeah,
go ahead.
one of the users already, like, I wrote just a simple Windows batch file that just does this command, this command, this command, and just like, yeah, just type this. Like, this is how you do command prompt, type this. You don't have to worry about anything else. It's just like, oh, I'm not sure. It just, yeah, the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
Yeah.
Just,
Well, Rebecca, you should unmute yourself. You have an excellent point, and thank you for whoever reminded me of Python enhancement proposal. That's what PEP means. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm here. Yeah, I mean, the main thing I've been using PyInstaller for is if I'm written something and I'm gonna have people use it, but they can't install and manage something on the machine. It's like, okay, here, plug it in. Which I feel like if they're so worried about security, I feel like that is way more of an issue than like installing a legit thing. But you know, the workarounds we come up with. But that's mainly what like I've been using PyInstaller. And I don't think it is Windows specific. I think it's just you have to run it on the same type of environment that you're gonna run the final executable in.
And I can confirm that in one tiny Python open source project that I helped with, that's what we had to do. We had a Windows guy. You make the executable Windows, and I made the executable Mac, and it worked on a Mac. And then now we have it on GitHub, so people can download the binary.
Yep. And that's the type of idea, because too, for some of these users, their daily work machine may not even have an internet connection too. So that's another reason why I want it all self-contained. So they have their little utility. It does what it needs to do. They don't have to worry about anything else. It's just a simple tkinter GUI, and they're good to go.
I like to talk about the weirdness that it happened to me. I've been known as this small community to always talk about VEMs, and then you go to UV, and they're done silently behind the scenes. And like whenever I give a presentation, I say like 20 times, don't forget to activate your VEM, but then you never activate them in UV. So that was a lesson. So I'm just echoing what people have said, that it just feels weird, but it is using in the background. But what's great is when you then use tools like VS Code or PyCharm, they're like, oh, you have a .vent folder. I know what's in there.
Yeah, and I develop in VS Code, and I have the same thing where it's like, you know, when I initialize a new project, I may need to make sure that VS Code is looking at the correct venv for it. But since the venv is in fact right there in the project, it's pretty good at finding it. And then it's like, awesome. Yeah, please do use that venv.
Yeah,
Find all my imports.
I was going to echo what Mike mentioned as well, where it feels really weird switching and then, not activating after you've got it in your, muscle memory to activate that venv, and then it's already done for you. So awesome.
Yeah, I had like the reverse actually, and that because I found Venv and like virtual env wrapper and all that like so unintuitive. When I moved to poetry and pipenv, I got totally away from thinking about venvs, and so UV has a kind of like back to the future or forward to the past thing going on for me, where it's like, oh, I have venvs in my project again, but I never have to think about them. Like I don't have the UX annoyances that they had always posed for me in the past. So,
And honestly, I think that's one of the things that's kept me away from like fully, embracing some of the other tools and just doing venv itself and poetry type of stuff, where um, not knowing what's interacting with what or which one of those I should pursue. And this one, it just seems clearly UV is the answer to all of this, which is fantastic to see in this kind of overall presentation from you both. So this is great.
Yeah,
Just wanted to, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say too, with some of the thoughts like, hey, this is a commercial company and they're developing something commercial. What are the license terms currently on UV? Like, is it one like the GPL where you can be assured that even if they go away from supporting open source, that it'll be available for the future, that others will have the right to modify it?
it's a good question. I don't know.
I'm gonna put a link to the blog post where they mention that their product, and see if I can find what they said. They vow to remain open source and permissible license. But
Yeah,
Okay.
so it looks like the GitHub repo has Apache and MIT licenses. So
Okay.
excellent, standard, very
Yeah.
permissive.
Yeah, that gives a little bit of a safety blanket there under the risk of being yanked away. They can only yank so much.
Right. Yeah.
Did
and
want to highlight one comment from Eric as well. The UV tree with some arguments for outdated and depth equals 1. It sounds like that can really help you see a lot of some of the outdated dependencies. So kind of another handy command.
Yeah, and we have some pretty active security monitoring tools in our environment, so it's hard for us to get stuff that's super out of date. But I definitely have problems sometimes with that, where I'm like, well, but like, where exactly is this thing you say is out of date, and can I work around it in some like, do I even still need it? I don't know, man. What do I need to update this thing? And so I do really like a tree command. Sometimes it's very handy.
Very cool. And some additional license chat going on in the text as well. Text chat. Well, cool. I know we normally try to keep these to about 45-ish minutes, where we've got maybe about three minutes left. Is there any other questions or thoughts on UV? I feel like for me, it kind of changed probably my approach for future projects. So that's good to know. Usually I just kind of tinker on my own. I've been thinking I really need to figure out ways of sharing code and making it available to some other people on my staff. So
Yeah.
this will be helpful. So
I would also say on that front, if you know the sort of dependency management isn't a regular part of your workflow, like it's not just that it's sharing code with others on your staff, although it is really critical so that other people can run the things you write. It's also sharing code with future you.
mhm.
Like I've run across several projects, including in the Code4Lib context, where the project is like a decade old, it has a requirements file, but it's not versioned. And it takes hours just to identify the right versions of the package to get it running before I can even develop anything with it. So it's nice to have version dependencies built in from the start.
That's a good point. There's probably a few tools that I've written a year and a half, 2 years ago now that are probably starting to age. So as I have updated other things for other projects, yeah, that's definitely going to be a concern. Yeah, Emil?
We got a volunteer to talk about PyCharm coming up.
Yeah, so the October 14th session, we'll dive into PyCharm, right? So that's coming up. I know it's what I use, and I'm probably using just bare bones, I'm probably not using it very well, so it'll be fantastic to kind of dive into that in a couple weeks. So cool.